Welcome back, everybody. This is Eric and Chad here with Iraq Veteran 8888. And today we have another Gun Gripe episode for you. This one is going to be a little bit of fun. We're going to be taking a little bit of a detour from just the straight up political stuff, and we're going to actually poke a little fun at our own people for a change. And we're going to be talking about gun gangs, right? The cliques, the groups of the gun cults that we see throughout society. And I think you're going to really enjoy this video. We're going to talk about Glock fanboys and H&K fanboys and everything in between. And this will be some good, honest fun. So let's get into this. But before we get started, I would like to thank our friends at Pyramid Air for supporting our channel. If you are looking for anything airgun related, they are your go-to source. Guns, tanks, projectiles, accessories, accoutrements, if you will. They got great, awesome selection, fast shipping, really good prices. And if you text IV8888 to 91256, you'll actually get $10 off your first $50 or more order. So check them out, Pyramid Air, and a big thanks to them for supporting our efforts here on the channel. All right, so we're going to get into this a little bit. Chad and I decided to throw this out of the mix a little, and because in some of the previous gun gripes that we were making, we were sort of discussing how sometimes our community can almost be their own worst enemy in some ways, but that is kind of the charm of it, I suppose, that, you do get interest groups together within the 2A community that, they like certain things, and we're going to kind of try to break some of those things down a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Just like the United States of America, the gun community is a giant melting pot of cultures and beliefs and religions. Yes, even religions.
It is.
There are churches that worship with the AR-15. Did you know that?
No, but I am going to look that up because I want to find out some more information about that as we're having our chat here. I think the easiest ones to look at initially, right, are going to be your usual suspects, right? Like the Glock fanboys, which we've been accused of being Glock fanboys, right? H&K fanboys. I mean, there's the AR versus AK debate. I mean, there's all these little subsections that we can kind of get into if you want. Let's just find somewhere to start and kind of go after it.
All right. So what rifle church do you belong to? Do you belong to the church of the AK-47 or do you belong to the church of the AR-15?
Well, I have to say that I worship at the church of the AR-15, most certainly. I mean, look, I love AKs. They're great. And again, this is a time-honored argument that gets passed around is which platform is superior, the AK or the AR. And I have to say, I'm definitely an AR guy.
So the funny thing is, like, there's people out there that will go to bat on social media these days for one or the other, and they fervently defend their position to the point of absurdity almost. But it's just so funny to see the arguments when they get started about one system being better than the other. And then even within those subsections, you have other subsections of folks that are like DI only. Like they worship at the DI altar or they worship at the piston altar. Like DI is trash, piston is God. I mean, dude, like it is insane how much is out there.
And it's crazy how so many people say that the AK is such a rugged gun, and they are. I mean, look, they're mass-produced. They hold up pretty well, all right? But they're not infallible. I mean, AKs have their share of issues. I mean, look at some of the mud tests that Ian's done over at Forgotten Weapons, or In Range TV, I think is the channel they post those on. Carl and Ian over there. But when they were doing their mud tests, the AK crapped the bed numerous times, and the AR actually held its own quite well in that test. I was very surprised. I've always felt that the AR is a more accurate platform, smoother recoil, and for me, it's like I look at accuracy as the pinnacle. I want accuracy. I want a fast round with some decent velocity. I want better range, flatter trajectory. So whereby there's AKs that will fit the bill, there certainly are. I own many AKs. I love 5.45x39. It's one of my favorite cartridges. I would say that's probably where I would draw the line between the distinction of the two, Chad.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you're going to compare an AR to an AK, that you have to compare the 5.45 to the 5.56 in a gun with a modest or equal barrel length And then in some of those situations, the AK might actually be a bit superior. You've got a folding stock, so the gun can get into a little bit more compact configuration. The 5.45 has a stiffer barrel because the hole's smaller for the same size barrel stock. We've gone over this in numerous videos, but you can start to blur the lines between those two distinctions. Now, I do have a Vice article pulled up here, and there's your church you're talking about.
I'm telling you.
Dude, we're going to put a link to this article in the description box below so you guys can see what we're seeing. There's literally some dudes standing here with ARs in this church, and it's a Vice reported on it. Wow. Attendants of the church hold their assault rifles. Of course, they're going to use the term assault rifle. While church members listen to a sermon during a blessing ceremony at the Sanctuary Church and the Rod of Iron Ministries.
That's it.
On Main Street in Newfoundland, Pennsylvania on Wednesday.
The Rod of Iron.
The Rod of Iron. The church that worships with AR-15s bought a 40-acre compound in Texas for its patriots. The Rod of Iron Ministries has become more militant since leader Hyung Jin Son Moon attended the riot at the U.S. Capitol. What? Oh my gosh! Here we go. Well,
anyways,
I mean, it takes all types, doesn't it?
Well, they might be a little bit biased. You can probably go to find a Wikipedia article that would be a little bit more factual.
But I mean, I do enjoy Vice's reporting sometimes.
Look, we have freedom of religion in this country, and it is funny to me that in a ritualistic sense, these rifles would be used in a church setting. But hey, like, more power to you.
I remember when the Russians were invading Georgia the first time around, the first Russian conflict. I mean, how many other Russian conflicts has there been in recent times? But when Russia invaded Georgia, now not the state Georgia, the country, when Russia invaded Georgia, I remember we were riding by in Georgia. We were there to train them. And this was right before the Russians came pouring into Georgia. And we were there on a training mission, and I recall seeing some of the dudes there that were guarding, let's just say, more of the, like the Capitol and the more important areas, government buildings and stuff. They were armed with Bushmaster XM177s, semi-auto. They didn't even have auto sears in them. They were semi-auto Bushmasters. And I remember seeing news articles after we got back where the priests over there were blessing the rifles. They would lay all the rifles out on the table, and they'd go down the line, and they would bless them with holy water and stuff. So, and that's, I guess it's that Orthodox, Eastern Orthodox
before
Christian.
Going into battle, that sort of thing.
Yeah, whatever. I mean, and that's cool. It's important that you have to take care of the tool that takes care of you in battle. So I guess it's important to bless those items in that situation. Maybe we want to talk about Glock fanboys and kind of, because we all get into our little groups and we hold those groups near and dear, and Glock fanboys are probably, I would say Glock fanboys and 1911 fans are the ones that fall into the most distinctive categories of the fanboy status, and the ones that will militantly guard their opinions about these particular items to a fault. They'll argue with you about it if you say anything bad about the gun that they choose.
I think to a certain degree it's 1911s against anything that's polymer frame.
Yeah.
So there's that, but I think the big conflict is between, all right, number one, between like Glock and SIG, and then HK and every other polymer frame gun, and then, all right,
1911s versus the world.
1911s versus the world, and then, all right, what's the most hated fanboy cult group out there that everybody hates? Think about it. What haven't we named? This is just my opinion, the way I think.
Well, if I can gather what you're probably getting at, I would say either like Kel-Tec or High Point, maybe.
No, CZs.
Oh, CZ fanboys are a thing, man.
They're like the millennials of. Well, I don't know. Maybe would it be fair to say they're kind of like the millennials of the gun cults, or are they more like the? I mean, I don't know. Because CZ's got a lot of classic designs, and they've moved on to a lot more modern designs. Glock has been basically the same forever. SIG's basically been the same forever, except for things like the P365 and all. They've got a military contract now, and they stomped Glock out of the water, so the SIG fanboys have that to go on, right? They give the Glock fanboys the beatdown over the M17 winning the contract, right?
That's right.
All right. But, I don't know. I think CZ is just...
I think SIG just won out on price, mainly.
I know. Well,
I think they outpriced Glock.
Price,
and that
probably
was one
modularity too, because I mean it's an interesting system, you know, and it's very modular, being able to replace parts and components from an armory standpoint. I will say though
that if I had to service a pistol, though, I'd rather service a Glock.
Me too. I mean,
in terms of replacing an actual part, like if you took that trigger mechanism, that modular system, you still got to pull the thing apart to replace something. The Glock is still easier to service.
Yeah, the Fire Control Unit, the FCU.
Yeah, I mean, look, I love it. I tend to be kind of one of those people that it's difficult sometimes for me to uphold any one company more than the other because of what Chad and I do for a living, and you know, we're always showing off so many different guns, and we've been exposed to so many different guns. I guess this is, in of itself, almost a gripe about ourselves, right? And that's okay. It's all right to admit fault sometimes, or to say when, you know, you've got a certain situation you got to adhere to or whatever, but we have to be unbiased, right? You know, I have to be able to, if I'm doing a video on a CZ and I love that gun, well, I'm going to say, wow, this is a great CZ. I love it. Or this is a great Henry, or this is a great Glock, or a great MMP, or, you know, man, we've shot so many SIGs that we like, and HKs that we like, and we've gotten to shoot so many different types of guns that it's really easy to get jaded after a while, that you go, wow, like, is it possible to hone in on what you really love that much? I mean, I think the answer certainly is yes, but is that to say that we're just going to become some raging fanboy for a certain company just because maybe one or two of the guns that they put out we really, really like? I don't think that's logically consistent to do. You know, admittedly, I was in the group where for a long time I considered myself to be a Glock fanboy, and I got accused of it quite a bit in the early years of our YouTube channel. And look, Glock makes a fine handgun. I'm definitely not here to say anything bad about Glocks. I think they're wonderful. They're definitely utilitarian pistol. They're solid. They're reliable. They're like the Honda Civic of guns. A Honda Civic, you get in it, you crank it up, it takes you where you need to go. It ain't flashy, it ain't fancy, but you know what? It gets the job done. It's a workmate. It gets you to the job, gets you home to your family. That's what a Glock is known for. Utilitarian, boring reliability, which is not a bad thing. But I think that a lot of the people that worship at the cult of Glock, they tend to not be able to get past, I guess, the legendary reliability and the legendary status that Glock has, and maybe expand their horizons onto something else.
Well, look, I mean, as a Glock fanboy, nobody has anything else to go on, man, because perfection. I mean, that's Glock's mantra. So how can you top perfection, right?
I must say, you know, I don't want to be critical because I do love Glock pistols. However, I do feel like the company has probably rested on their laurels a bit. I think that's putting it nicely. I mean, how many people have been asking for years for Glock to release some form of a carbine?
Dude.
How awesome would that be? I mean, look at the PCC market. Look how on fire it is. Look at how many companies are essentially outmaneuvering them in the market. And look at how many companies like PSA with their Dagger, which we'll get into PSA fanboys in a minute. Look, I'm a PSA fanboy, but maybe for different reasons than you might think. But we'll get into that in a minute. But look at the PSA Dagger, where you've got a gun with an RMR cut, a threaded barrel, high night sights. I'm talking tritium night sights, with magazines, a case, everything ready to go. Good deal, like nice coatings, lightning cuts, ergonomic pistol ready to use that is essentially does the same thing for like $400.
I'm still of the belief.
And it's ready to go out the box. You got a suppressor host out of the box for $400.
It's unfathomable to me how they can...
Look at the mechanics.
I know.
I mean, those guns are very affordable, and they're so functional and accurate.
Well, like with PSA, if you want to get on that topic, it's still unfathomable to me how they sell guns at the prices that they do and keep the doors open. I'm still of the belief that they have like an army of Oompa Loompas. I'm serious, like an army of Oompa Loompas in the factory running that place, and they're paying them in like chocolate. or something like that.
Something.
I don't know.
Something.
But it is amazing to me how their business model works and how they can offer guns at such low prices. Not only guns, but quality guns, reasonable quality guns that work, right? I mean, how many PSAs have we ever shot that didn't work out of the box?
I can't really say that I've had a major issue out of a PSA product. Now, you've heard stories of where people will say, well, I had a front sight post on my A2 that was canted a little bit, or my gun had a few scratches or whatever. Maybe they neglected to notice that it was sold as a blim item, which that's common. They do have some blims from time to time they'll sell. The point is, though, you also have to look at the pool of guns that you're drawing that imperfection out of, right? So if a gun, all right, one gun that you heard about that had a canted front sight post, okay, you realize how many freaking guns these people are selling all the time, right? So how many guns were perfect, and how many times did you hear about the one squeaky wheel that might have had an issue? I'm not going to say there's not issues, but the more guns you make, inevitably you're going to run into some gun that's going to have an issue here or there. But they stand behind them.
Well,
they're going to take care of it.
Yeah. Anybody who is a PSA fanboy should be a fan, or should be proud to be a fanboy, because PSA is doing the work of making firearms commonly available. And what's the term that we use quite often?
Well, what we want to do is create much more of a common use type profile amongst certain varieties of guns that traditionally would maybe have a harder time being thrown into that common use category. When we look at, now this is getting more on the political grandstand, but I think it's important to give PSA their props where it's due, okay, is that when we look at common use, I think there was a situation where I forget, I don't have the information in front of me because I wasn't exactly prepared. I didn't know this was going to come up in conversation, so I'm just going to sort of paraphrase it. But essentially, a sum of some 20,000 stun guns was considered common use, because I think they were trying to say, oh, you can't carry stun guns in the city limits or some crap like that, or some ordinance or law or something they were trying to pass to restrict carrying of guns and other weapons in the city limits or something. And they wound up determining that, well, if there's 20,000 tasers out there, that's considered common use. Well, 20,000, that ain't nothing compared to guns, right? When we start talking numbers of guns, PSA sells thousands and thousands and thousands of guns, probably monthly, right? So when these people are trying to say, oh, well, that gun isn't protected by the Second Amendment, or that gun falls under the NFA because it's unusual or odd, or it's not in common use, that is completely a lie, right? When we look at that, PSA has done a great job of making certain guns much more in common use. In fact, I saw at SHOT Show where PSA is finally going to release their version of the Sturmgewehr. All right, they're going to release it in the 8mm Kurz, 7.62 by 39, and I think I saw 300 Blackout and maybe even 5.56. So how cool is that to think that maybe one day we'll have an affordable Sturmgewehr that we can actually, everyone can own, and the originals, of course, are very rare and very expensive. And so I think that they have done a fantastic job, and I think it's worth giving props to someone like Century as well, who have made the delayed roller blowback guns a lot more prevalent and easy to get. I mean, I remember when you could buy Setmes for $400. They weren't super nice, but gosh, a G3 type gun for $400, $500, that was a great deal, And then look at the MP5s they're bringing in, right? You would have never thought that you would see something like one of those AP9s or whatever that Century puts out. You never thought that you would have saw one of those for like $1,000. I mean, you'd never buy an MP5 clone for $1,000, and that's still a lot of money, but it's more affordable.
Yeah, it is. But like PSA, when they were teasing on their MP5s that they were going to be releasing, I mean the estimated retail price was going to be like $900 for like an MP5K variant. Like heck yeah.
Look, if y'all don't know, MP5s use a receiver flat that has to get very carefully, folded over and everything and pressed in place. They use, like, I guess, a hydraulic press or some type of a stamping or whatever, and then they have to be welded precisely. I mean, MP5s are tricky to make. They're not exactly, they don't lend themselves to mass production quite as well as something like an AR I mean, AKs are tricky too. Now, PSA, not to. Here I am being a victim of my own gun gripe. I will get off of PSA and move on to another company, but PSA has also done a great job of bringing AK manufacturing to the United States, and they have seemingly kind of figured out the model for mass producing these things and making them affordable, that's also an admirable thing to mention.
Oompa Loompas.
Oompa Loompas. Yeah, they've got little Russian Oompa Loompas drinking vodka and smoking cigarettes in the back, going, "Pass me another barrel blank, Dimitri." You know, it's like.
Did they do like one of these dances?
Yes.
You know.
Yeah. Every time one goes down the line, they just
press the barrel into the AK trunnion.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that sort of thing, right? Okay.
Yeah, and all they do is they feed them like strawberries, and they give them like wine and cigarettes, and that's it. That's all they eat. That's all their diet is.
Cigarettes.
All right.
And
anyway,
vodka.
we're gonna move on. We're gonna move
what
on.
about,
But PSA, definitely, I think they deserve good props.
Okay.
It's worthy of being a PSA fanboy because a lot of folks, their first gun is a PSA. It's affordable.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that.
So, all right, thinking about ARs. All right, so fanboys within the AR world.
Ooh.
All right, so you have. Okay, like
I can feel the heat.
If it ain't a Colt, it ain't nothing.
Yeah.
Right. All right. So, and like I think about Colt fanboys, and Colt's kind of, they've kind of fallen out of the spotlight for sure. I mean, with other newer, more prevalent AR manufacturers that are out there.
I do like their retro stuff.
The retro stuff is cool,
Pretty cool,
and the classic Colts still hold a lot of value, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like SP1s and whatnot, they're still very desirable guns, and a lot of the cloners out there, which, God save me,
that's a whole nother group.
I will never understand. I understand like the whole idea of clones, but these people take it to another level, man. Like, for example, okay, I wanted a clone of an Israeli, IDF Ruger 1022, right? So it didn't have to be like exact down to the smallest nut and bolt and screw and everything else. Like, I just needed a facsimile of that just for my own personal enjoyment.
Mm-hmm.
These guys, they have to have like the exact takedown pins and like, oh, if that spring isn't new old stock from 1984, I don't want it.
Yeah.
Like, and specific receivers with the very specific markings on them from a given model.
Mm-hmm.
They will pay thousands of dollars for a receiver to get this gun together, and you get that satisfaction. It's like, it's done. Now what do? Oh, I build another clone.
Yeah. Well, look, I can understand the clone crowd. If it's got to be right, it's got to be right. I think that if you're going to put a lot of money into a delayed roll or blowback, like that Zenith that I have, I've got a considerable investment in that gun. And, you want it to look right. You want it to have all the correct stuff. You want it to look like the real thing. If you can't afford a real MP5, you want it as close to the real thing as you can get. Or I think another distinctive area of clone builders that are out there are folks that, like myself, I had a, M16A4, Knights Armament, flat top receiver, Knights Armament rail, the cheesy little Knights Armament like forward grip on it, and remember those scales that would go on the Knights Armament rails that you had to push in, kind of push them hard and slide them off, and they always like cut your hand open and stuff. They were just, real sharp edges, the old school rail systems. There is, I think, something to be said for having a clone of maybe a service rifle you used in the military. Maybe you want it to look as close to the real thing as possible. Maybe you want to try to replicate some wear that your gun had. Maybe you had some scratches on it. Maybe you painted it a certain way. You could paint it that way again, When I go so far as to, seek out a real deal Knights rail system, yeah, I probably would. If I was building a clone, a real deal M16A4. But then again, you get into like FN. FN has their military service line that, sure, it says FN on it and not Colt. But they're pretty dang close to what a lot of us were issued in the sandbox. So for a guy like me, that's good enough. Like if I bought, one of the M16A4s from FN, well, there you go. I'd put an ACOG on that thing, maybe put a 203 on the bottom and just be done with it, kind of go all out, make it a little silly.
All right, let me pose a question. All right, so with with the rise of Palmetto State Armory and the ARs and stuff that they're putting out and selling like hotcakes, you think some of the spotlight has come off of Anderson and the whole poverty pony mantra?
Well, it is interesting to note that PSA just released their spiker.
Yeah.
Have you seen that?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's a clone of the old school Chinese Norinco Polytech spiker Type 56s, I guess.
Yeah,
no, that's
something like
right.
that.
The Type 56 was the SKS. It was, the AK, the
like
spiker
AK, yeah.
AKs. They had the real fat, ugly wood grip on them, the real thick, heavy furniture, and the built-in bayonet lug like you saw in the SKS with the spike bayonet, just like an SKS. But anyway, you're seeing the cloning in the AK world as well. Now, the poverty pony thing, that's a cult in of itself, and I'll agree that. Look, I've built many ARs using Anderson lowers, and I have no major complaints with them. The ones that we have, they hold up just fine. They work okay. I'd say maybe about the only issue we've ever seen out of them is on some of them, the hole for the grip screw is not always machined all the way through.
It's not tapped all the way.
It's not tapped all the way through. It's machined all the way through, but it's not tapped all the way through. And sometimes you have to either chase it with a tap or shorten the screw for the grip. That's about the only issue. And then sometimes maybe the anodizing's a little thick sometimes. You may have to just chase some of the pinholes a little bit here and there. But all in all, not bad for the money.
Not bad. Work. But I'd say that a lot of the higher end AK fan or AR fanboys within the AR cult hate the cheaper stuff like Anderson's. And they no, I'm not going to touch that crap with a 10-foot pole. But, the funny thing is that I don't think a lot of them really understand. There's only like a handful of forges where all those forgings come from.
Yeah.
And then they're finished machined basically the same specs, and they're borderline the same receivers, more or less. Unless you're dealing with a higher end custom forging like what Daniel Defense uses or some of the other higher end manufacturers that have ambidextrous controls and features on and things like that. But for the most part, an AR receiver is an AR receiver is an AR receiver.
Yeah.
But
I can see that. I
can understand the cloner's perspective. They want things a certain way. They want specific markings because it's a collector's niche. And I get it. Sometimes I just don't understand it. You know what I mean? All right. Another high-end AR manufacturer that people love to just crap on. All right. And I've had experience with these guns, but the Knights Armament guns. All right. You look at the price of these guns and you think, oh my God, why do they cost so much? And I still wonder that myself, but the Stoner rifle. Okay?
The M110 is a fantastic gun.
So, yeah, but you've got the SR25s, you've got the SR15s, the 5.56 versions and such. Yeah. And I've had the opportunity to shoot those guns on a number of occasions, and they are very fine rifles. They have some very unique features, comparatively speaking, but what I want to understand is how commonly available components, like for a lower, should cost 4 to 5, 6 times more than what the going rate is for some of those parts, like springs, like pins, like takedown pins, things like that. I think that
you're paying for a name, but you're also paying for in a situation like that. If you look at an LMT, or I think an LMT would be a great area to look, or like the Noveske rifles. I mean, they're just put together with a great deal of care. And like on the M110, that usually you're going to buy it as a deployment package, and it has a suppressor with it.
Yep.
And those suppressors are absolutely tuned and fitted to each individual gun properly so that everything's good to go. I mean, you got the optic on there that's bore-sighted and ready to go. I mean, it's literally a deployment package.
Some of those things can be $20,000 I've seen on the open market,
They're nice. I mean, look, the M110 is a fantastic gun.
And look, I've seen uppers being separated from SR25 lowers going for several $1,000s for the upper, well above what the retail cost would be, but in a configuration that you can't get. So I had a buddy that wanted...
You see that with HK a lot.
You do. So I had a buddy that had a 14.5-inch SR25, and they didn't offer a complete gun at the time, so he had to piecemeal it together, and he did some horse trade and all, but this was a $6,000 setup. But this thing shot numerous half MOA groups, and I was very pleasantly surprised at how accurate this thing was. And like I said, they're a fine gun, but man, the Sandcutter bulk carrier groups that Knights has. I mean, I've seen guys sell these things and buy them up for $1,000 for a bulk carrier group just so they can complete their clone or their current rig or upgrade or something. It's just insane to me, the market for KAC product.
I know.
It is insane. I mean, that is a cult within a cult within a cult within a cult.
Yeah.
To a certain degree. But
I mean, every group has got, their diehard people that are big fans. I mean, like, look at Kevin's people, Q. I mean, look, Kevin is an awesome dude. I mean, I converse with Kevin from time to time, and look, I think highly of Kevin Brenningham, and I think highly of Q, and I think some of the things he's done with his products are pretty freaking awesome. I mean, he's done a great job at making some real futuristic stuff and being very forward thinking, He's working with that 8.6 blackout. That's cool. I mean, he's really thinking outside the box, and his fans and his fan base certainly, they're all very logical people. They're all very nerdy. They love to really get into the weeds about data and numbers and things. And Kevin, he's very much in that mindset, So you're always going to have those groups of people that fall into their certain fan bases. And, sometimes it's warranted. We look at CZ, I know CZ has this, reputation, right, for just like being a hipster gun, or I don't know how they would figure on that, but maybe it's just because it's, double single action and who knows, all metal gun. Maybe it crosses that bridge between being like the bespoke quality of a 1911 being metal to metal. They do have polymer guns too, but they still make a lot of metal frame guns. So maybe there's that bespoke quality, but it's still a production gun that puts it into like, I don't know, like this sort of aesthetic of being an affordable race gun like the Shadow 2, which is a great gun. I love CZ pistols. But am I a diehard CZ person to the end? I wouldn't say that. I mean, I love MMPs. I love all different types of pistols too, but it's just so weird to think about it in those terms.
Well, it's funny because there's people out there I've seen just on social media, and there's like meme threads on AR15.com and other forums about this kind of crap, but like the Glock fanboys or the SIG fanboys or the M1911 fanboys, they stick to like one type of gun, and they will not buy, use, trade, look at, touch, smell anything else. They will not do it. They refuse, and that's a travesty.
I will say this.
Because you're not sampling all the water, man.
I know. I will say this, though. There have been situations where I'll take a gun out, and generally, like, I know within a pretty quickly if it's something I'm going to like or not. You know what I mean? I remember when we first got those Canik Elites in, and we were doing videos on those, and I've never been a huge fan of the standard Glock trigger. And I've always struggled a little bit with some of the striker-fired triggers because I grew up shooting revolvers in 1911s. Sorry, it just is what it is. I mean, that's a whole nother cult of people, or wheel gun people, 1911 people. I mean, look, you like what you like. That's cool. I got no complaints with you. But I grew up shooting those types of triggers, so that's what I'm used to. It took me a long time to kind of warm up to striker-fired guns, but I remember when I first shot that Canik, I thought, man, the trigger on this thing is so freaking good. Like, it's vastly superior to a Glock.
Was that one of the newer, like the Metes? Yeah. Those things have such fantastic
They
triggers.
shot so good.
Yeah.
And, I'm thinking, wow, like, why can't every striker-fire gun have a trigger like that? The newer M&Ps, like the 2.0 metal, that gun shot great. Great trigger, nice rigid frame. I mean, it definitely kind of crossed the line, right, between polymer guns and metal guns. So it seems like Smith & Wesson is kind of getting back to that a little bit. That new pistol they just released, I think it's called the CSX.
Yeah, CSX
that
or
little,
something like
like,
little
9
tiny metal
millimeter,
frame.
looks kind of like almost like a little hybrid 1911 sort of deal. We haven't gotten one of those in to review yet, but I have a feeling we'll probably be getting one of those in to do some video work on. I'm very curious about that little gun because I like the P365 XL. That's kind of my go-to carry pistol. And look, I've been kind of a fanboy for those SIGs for a while. I like the M17. I like the M18. I like the P320. I'm a big fan of the Flux Raider, which allows me to use the 320 chassis, which I'm a huge fan of that rig. I think it's a very forward-thinking setup. So I don't know. I'm kind of thinking that new Smith could maybe bridge that gap, And then they just released the Shield Plus, so that's kind of competing with the 365 a bit. Of course, you have the Glocks with the double stack Shield arms mags. So
like
the industry is always going to pivot and compete with each other for your business, right? And that's cool. But it's like, man, I always go back to that SIG. I just can't help it. I just love it.
It's still good. It's a good gun. I still want one at some point. But I think recently I saw, just scrolling through Instagram or somewhere, maybe there was a polymer frame 1911 that came out or something along those lines. It was kind of goofy. And I'm thinking, oh, boy, here we go.
Mm-hmm.
Like a double stack, polymer frame, 1911 top, whole 9 yards. Kind of like your old Kimber.
Yeah.
I've
got a BP-10 2 Plus and 14 round magazines of 45 ACP in your hand. So it is kind of a bit of a bulky gun, but it is pretty cool.
It is neat. I mean, the FNX, 45 Tactical kind of does it for me in that realm.
Mm-hmm.
But that's
you
always
got the
been
threaded barrel, which is nice. You can shoot it suppressed, which I still got to figure out why my Tyrant. I think it's just my suppressor for some reason, just not meshing with that particular gun. But I'm having some real accuracy issues out of my FNX. But I need to try some different cans on it.
I'm sorry, maybe you should have bought a Glock.
Well, Glocks don't, sometimes Glocks don't exactly suppress that well in terms of functionality. Like, they can be kind of finicky.
Now,
you're messing with perfection.
You are.
You're adding something to the equation that Gaston didn't think of.
I'm trying to think of any other fanboys that we may have looked over or forgotten about.
There's so many sects when it comes to, like, the religion, gun cultist religion. I mean, look. It's not a bad thing, okay? Look,
I have one.
Milsurps, okay? I mean, there's folks that, like, all they're into is old school stuff, Milsurps, and black powder. I mean, you're always going to have your little groups of people that have their interest levels, and there's certainly nothing wrong with it. It's natural for us to do that. I mean, it's a very American trait for us all to have common interests, and you see the black powder guys get out and they do their rendezvous together and they camp out and shoot, and that's cool. They compete or whatever. Same thing with Milsurp collectors. You're going to have your circles of people that they're extremely knowledgeable about every little tiny screw on every single Milsurp ever made. As a gun owner, I think I've always just been the kind of guy that I love guns, right? I love everything that has to do with guns, right? So for me, it was always hard to really zone in on one area because I love machine guns. I love black powder. I love cannons. I love air rifles. I love, you name it. Milsurps, modern, old, doesn't matter. I just love guns, period. So I've always been, I guess, what you'd call sort of just a universal gun guy that, hey, if it launches a pill, I can pretty much be interested in it, I think I've gotten much more into suppressors over the last few years, especially, Chad's gone real hardcore down the suppressor round. I mean, that's a whole other group of people where you're suppressor nerds, you're airgun nerds. I mean, they're all going to have their followings, and there's nothing wrong with that. Mm-hmm. Well, what were you thinking?
All right, so I got a few. All right. M14, FAL. Ooh, man. Like the right arm of the free world. And then you got the M14.
Ooh.
Like, no other battle rifle can top the FAL. Oh, no, the M14. The M14's a giant, turd. It's a big old steel turd, It gets dirty and clogged up. It jams right and left. The FAL is used in more countries, as a service weapon than anything else ever in history, right?
I think I'm an FAL guy.
So you got that, and then you got within the gun cults. I think that fuddery could be a cult all in itself.
Oh gosh,
right?
How could you not mention fuds?
I mean, like there's just a fud cult, and it's kind of the culmination of all those thoughts of, what do you need that for? You need polymer, you need wood and metal, boy. Wow.
I will say though that Springfield Armory has that SOCOM 16, the little short.
You are all about that, aren't you?
M1A. Now, that I like. Short and compact, handy. I'm wanting to. I'm going to probably end up getting a DSA FAL with like a 13-inch barrel in the folding paratrooper stock. Mm-hmm. That's kind of that's the rig that I would want in an FAL with a little 13-inch barrel, something short and handy. Woo. Although, look, the full-length Israeli heavy barrel is kind of hard to beat. Anyway, I digress.
Eric is going to join the cult of unburned powder.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
So let's see. The other, what was the other one I was just thinking of? Oh man, FAL M14 Fuddy Duddies.
Fuds in general.
Fuds in general. Lord Almighty, I had another one in my head. I should have written it down. If I don't write things down these days, they just kind of flutter away. I'll go ahead. I'll think about it.
Well,
oh no, I know what it was.
Go ahead.
If it ain't a 308, it ain't nothing.
Oh, the 308 Fanboy.
Oh man, or like 6.5 Creed. Like you want to talk about hipsters? I mean, like if you could personify the relationship between someone who loves the 308 and someone who loves the 6.5 Creedmoor, it'd literally be like, a boomer and then, a hippie like I used to look like with long hair and whatever, just hanging out like, yeah, man, 6.5 Creedmoor is the new ticket, dude. Like, no, 308, son.
I think that, we've covered this in previous videos, but we'll just kind of quickly recap.
Ammunition cults.
Just to recap, is that I think it's important to have a 308 autoloader, maybe a bolt gun laying around, even if it's just a hunting rifle, just so you can use 308 ammo, which is obviously quite common. And then, 6.5 Creed, I mean, if you're looking for performance, you've got some options, 6mm Creedmoor, 6.5 Creedmoor, 6.5 PRC, 300 PRC. I mean, there's lots of these newer cartridges that are definitely doing some great things. I mean, I remember the first time I shot a 6.5 284 in the Desert Tech. It's like the laser beam. It's awesome. I remember the first time I shot a 338 Lapua, which, was a TRG 42 with a Heinsolt optic on it, which... I mean, how much cooler can you get than that? So every cartridge is going to have their fanboys, the people that love them. But I think the true gun guys and gals that are out there will see the merits and flaws of every single cartridge. And you know what? Be accommodating to any cartridge. I mean, there's days that I'm just craving to get out and shoot, my 10-inch 7.62 by 39 AK. Or sometimes you just want to blast some rounds out of the Mutant full auto.
Mm-hmm.
That's
right,
okay.
So
you just sling some lead.
My feeling about the whole topic is I like to have a like budget membership with every cult because I like all the things and I like to participate in all the things and be able to pick this and pick that, take a SIG, take a Glock, compare the two, whatever the case is. You like to have options. But it's kind of like if you're such a fanboy that you're only dedicated to one particular brand, that's all fine and good. It has its advantages, but I think you're limiting yourself a little bit too, to a certain degree. You're not able to like fully enjoy the vast sea of gun ownership options that are out there. I don't know. Maybe.
I think that's always been my approach to the gun world, is to just try to keep an open mind, and for me, my first epiphany was, when I got into milsurps, because I thought it was so cool. I always loved military history, and I always enjoyed military rifles, and to think that, wow, there's all this vast sea of different milsurps that you can own. And when you get out on that path, it can be addicting and a lot of fun, and you learn a lot too. It helps you learn history to put things into your hands that were used in conflicts and that actually have historical significance. I mean, we're not just talking a copy. I've got Finnish M39 service rifles that were used by ski troops in the Winter War 39. I've got guns that were actually used in conflict. So it's something cool to be able to, hold a piece of history in your hand and actually shoot it and enjoy it. So I think, just sort of cowering away into one little group, I think is a little self-defeating. People should have an open mind, and they should experience everything that guns have to offer, because there's so many cool things you can do. If you've never shot a 50 before, I mean, you need to do it. It's awesome.
I think everybody's in the cult of 50.
I mean
everybody
the minute you squeeze a trigger on a 50, you're like, okay, I like this.
You've got a lifetime membership, I think,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
I think you do sell yourself short for sure if you kind of back yourself into a corner and you just focus on one thing.
Or the mile club, shooting a mile.
Yeah.
I mean, how many people have shot a mile? It's fun.
Mm-hmm.
It's challenging, right? There's a lot of things that can go wrong, but once you connect, it's like, wow, I just sent a bullet a mile and hit the target.
Yep.
It's awesome.
I will say that the fanboy cults like really do make for good entertainment, though.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah.
I mean, like, look, keep it up.
Yeah, I mean,
But
we're all guilty. No matter who you are within the gun world, you are guilty of being a fanboy at some given point. This isn't really meant to like kick any mud on anybody. We're just kind of discussing that, sometimes in the 2A world, we all almost kind of become our own worst enemies. We get after each other's throats about little things, and people get real defensive about things. And there's just no reason to be that way. Enjoy what you enjoy. Do you. Let other people do what they want, and I think the world will be a better place,
Mm-hmm.
Just get out there and shoot some guns, man. Don't worry about it. Just get out there and shoot some guns, man.
shoot some guns.
Just shoot them.
It's like, hey, honey, we got to go to church. We're running late. Don't forget the rifles. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's it.
All right,
Make
here
sure
we
it's the clean one so we look good on Sunday. That's pretty phenomenal. I had no idea that was a thing, but, I'm going to do some more research on that,
Oh, boy.
that church. That
I'll expect a
worships
Substack on the topic by tomorrow morning.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
We'll see.
So
Yeah, I do
homework.
have a Substack, so make sure you subscribe to my Substack feed. You'll see it there on my post feed here on YouTube.
Ding.
Shameless plug.
Ding.
But I think this, we could talk about this for hours probably, but I think this gives you a pretty good synopsis of how this looks in terms of the gun gangs. All right, that's what we're going to call this. But
I'm sure we missed some.
yeah, we
So-
missed some. So did we miss a group? Let me know down in the comment section below. Respectfully, let your piece be known, and maybe we'll revisit this video with some of your suggestions about some of the cults that we might have missed.
How could you have forgotten about?
Ding. All right. Hope everybody has a great day. Thanks so much for tuning in. Don't forget about that pyramid link, okay? If you just go over and text IV8888 to 91256, you'll get $10 off your next $50 or more order from Pyramid. So, again, big thanks to them for supporting us. And thank you so much for watching. Make sure you subscribe, click the notification bell. Many more videos on the way. We'll see you soon.
What was that number again? 867-509?
No.
What was it? What was it?
91256, fool.
I'm just kidding.